Hey guys, this is a new thing I'm gonna try out since we've lost Mr. Inko. Well, we didn't really lose him. He's just gone downstairs to fill in for an AP US history teacher that left. So left with the fact that I don't know who your sub was going to be, I've decided to start recording my presentations. Hopefully this works, and if it doesn't, well, we'll see what happens. Give me your feedback and let me know if you understood or yeah, if it's not working for you. Please let me know. All right, well, let's get started. So today, since you just took a test on Friday, we're actually going to start a new topic today, and this is going to be GDP, which is what you're looking at. You should be looking at this presentation right now. So GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, and what that means is it's a measurement of all the output that a country is are producing in one year. Okay, but we're gonna get into what exactly it measures. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where the United States actually stands on it stands in GDP compared to the rest of the world. It's at the top. And so this is a measurement from 2017. So it does take a while to gather this information. So we don't have, I can probably find 2018, but it wasn't be that correct. And 2019 is definitely still being aggregated. So this is a very, 2017 is probably the latest that we can actually measure, or we have good measurements for. So the USA is at the top. You can see China is the second largest economy in the world, followed by Japan, Germany, United Kingdom. See, India is there. India actually is doing better than France. When I was your age, India wasn't even on this list. It was still developing. And so we've got Brazil, Italy, and Canada. Notice that the countries that you're probably very familiar with, Mexico, Spain, they're not even in the top 10. Not to say that their economies are not influential in the world, it just means that they're not the biggest economies, they're not the biggest consumers. The USA is by far the biggest. As you can see, the gap here is pretty large. However, if we stayed at the same growth, China would actually be the largest one, that's the predictions, by about 2050. But no one ever knows what's going to happen, right? We could have some catastrophe like a coronavirus that's going to change everything, right? Okay, so you want to make sure that you are filling out your notes. You should have grabbed this at the front door. There's the GDP notes. If you didn't grab it, some of y'all I know forget. Make sure that you do so now, and start to fill these out as we go through the presentation, okay? So our targets for this lesson, because we're going to actually be looking at GDP all week, is understand what GDP is, understand why sustained growth in GDP is actually necessary. This is why we measure it, because if we start going backwards, and we know that something's wrong in the economy, and if you start going backwards as a society, then there's an issue, and the governments will have to start to step in to do something about it. Okay, and then we are also going to be doing some calculations on GDP and measuring it. Okay, it's not as hard as you think, don't freak out. Okay, so what is GDP? So it is the aggregate of all the products that a country is producing, but it's final products. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more. It's not like every single little thing, it's final products. And so it's a good measurement or a good snapshot of what the economy is doing, but it doesn't really get down into the nitty-gritty of what is being produced. To give you an example, if you're sitting in a classroom right now and I walked in the door and I took a picture of the 36 students or 30 students that are in the classroom, I would imagine that if somebody 50 years down the road was looking at the picture, they would see a classroom that was, clean, It didn't look like you guys were sweating, so it means that you had air conditioning, indicating some sort of wealth. You wouldn't look like you were starving. The picture would show you could look, I mean, basically, you could look a snapshot of a classroom of at Harlan High School and say, these students are pretty well off. Like they're maybe we can't really say you're billionaires, but we can definitely tell that you're not in some sort of developing country or some third world country. We can tell a lot about what you're by what you're wearing. That you probably are living in an economy that is good. However, that snapshot wouldn't tell you what's going on in individual lives. Like, it wouldn't tell me that maybe somebody in the classroom's mom just lost their job, or that somebody couldn't afford to pay their electric bill this month. I mean, that GDP, that snapshot wouldn't show me that. It's just a picture. And that's basically what GDP is like. It's when people measure GDP and you read about GDPs, it's just like, it's a snapshot. It's not actually showing you the nitty gritty. So why do we even measure it? Or why do we even look at it? And we do that because it's a good way to compare to other countries, and it's a good way to kind of just take the temperature of what the economy is doing. I mean, when I say take the temperature, it doesn't mean that we can't tell with the temperature exactly if there's a disease, what kind of disease it is, right? If you're running 103 fever, we don't know if it's because you have the flu or you have meningitis. It takes further research for that, right? Just taking the temperature just shows me that you have a fever or you don't. That's kind of what GDP is. It's like we're just trying to find out a roundabout way of where the economy is, okay? All right, so please remember that it only measures final products, not intermediate products. So intermediate products are things that it takes to make other products. So for example, you can see here, it says intermediate products are used when producing a final product, like steel for a car. Okay, so let's take that into account. Or let's take a car. You can't count like the glass that's used to make windows into GDP. You can't count the steel that's used to make the car into GDP, or the plastic, or the rubber for the tires, or the metal that's used in the I don't know, those things that guys love putting on their cars, the rims. Yes, the rims. You can't count that. The only thing that's going to be counted into GDP is a brand new final car sales. That's it. So, and also if it's a used car, like let's say you go out and buy a used car, that's not counted. It's the final brand new product. Okay? And we'll get to why in just a second. All right. So it does not include used cars. Like I just said, it never includes, like if you go out and buy a used car, that's not included in GDP. That's just considered an intermediate activity. So if you buy a used house, like if you go buy a house that was built in the 1970s, like I live in a house that was built in the 1960s. My house was when purchased not considered into GDP. The only time houses are being bought or counted in GDP is when they're brand new, like the ones that are being built around Harlan. Those are definitely considered, and they're a good indication is that the San Antonio economy is doing well. If we have to build new houses because we don't have enough houses for the current population, and there's enough money for people to buy houses, that means our economy is booming. And it definitely is. I just read an article about how 66 people a day are moving to Texas, are moving to San Antonio, not just Texas. San Antonio is growing outrageously. This is one of the reasons we can't find a good teacher right now, because there's so many new schools and so many people moving here. If we lose a teacher, it's near to impossible to find one right now, especially in the middle of the school year. Easier to find when, like in the summer, when people are graduating from college and they're ready to teach. All right, sidetrack. Sorry. Okay, so we do not count financial assets. So if you've invested in the stock market and you made $30,000 last year, that's not counted into GDP. The only way that would be counted in is if you went and cashed out your account and you bought something, like you bought a house or you bought a car or you bought equipment for your business. Then it would be counted in GDP. Otherwise, it's not counted. So anything, and this is very, very important, if it's an import, so let's say you buy a car, it's a brand new car, but it's not an American car. It's some sort of fancy sports car from Italy. That is not part of our GDP, it's part of Italy's GDP. Okay, so we do not count imports because GDP is measuring what our country is producing. And it's only final products. So it's what our country's producing, and it's only final products. All right. Now, we don't ever count like household production. Let me go back to that picture there. So, like, let's say you do add-ons to your home, or you renovate your bathroom or your kitchen, or you hire somebody to clean, just hire somebody to clean your house. That's not counted into GDP. We don't count subsistence farming as well, which means like if you are growing food and you have a garden. I have a garden in my backyard. If you're growing a garden and you're supplementing your food supply with that, it's not counted. The only time farming products are going to be counted is if it's going to be something that's actually sold at market. Okay, so if it's like sold to HEB for you to consume, like the mass public to consume, then it is counted. But then again, remember, we don't count imports. So if you go to HEB and you buy an avocado and it says product of Mexico, that is part of Mexico's GDP, not ours. Okay? All right. We also, of course, don't count underground markets or unreported economic activity. So there's a little lemonade stand here to represent that. But actually, underground markets in the U.S. are robust. And of course, they're usually illegal markets. So if you can imagine how much the drug trade makes in the United States, I mean, billions of dollars, right, of drugs being traded underground and illegally, none of that is counted into our production. So that's a lot of money that goes unaccounted for and untaxed. We don't count, like, if there's underground gambling rings. None of that gets counted because it's technically it's illegal. It's under the market. It's under the radar. So none of that gets counted. Now, we also, GDP, this is really important today because I know there's a lot of people I know that, we just had a State of the Union address a week ago, and President Trump was talking about how well our economy is doing. And he's right. If you look at our GDP, it's doing very well. Our unemployment rate is at 3.5%. But what it doesn't tell you is the amount of wealth disparity, meaning how much money the wealthy are making and how little everyone else is making. And it's not taking into account the fact that tons of people are moving to cities right now because that's where the jobs are. There, in the 1960s, 50s to 70s, there was this thing called the white flight, right? Everybody was moving to the suburbs, and then it wasn't just white people, it was everybody moving out into the suburbs and moving into rural areas of the United States because it was less expensive to live in, and the cities became really dangerous, especially in the 80s with the crack epidemic. But nowadays, people are moving back. They're moving back downtown, into the middle of the cities. And the problem with this is the housing market is not growing fast enough to meet that demand. And most people don't have the credit or the money to even buy a house. So that means that the cost of living, that means everybody's renting, and then rents go up. I'm sure you guys, if you even looked at how much it is to rent an apartment in San Antonio, it's ridiculous. In the Alamo Ranch, it's like $1,200 for one bedroom apartments, which is just stupid. There's no reason for that. If you have the money to actually go buy a house, you could buy a house and pay that in mortgage and have a 4-bedroom house. It's the disparity between renting and buying is outrageous right now. So when you look at something like the GDP and you say, look at that, our GDP is so high, we're producing all of this stuff, that doesn't tell you that there's wealth disparity. That's good for corporations and good for CEOs that are making all the money, but it's not good for everybody else. You have to look deeper for that information. So when you hear people say our economy is doing incredible, yeah, it is for some people, but not for everybody. And that's an issue. And when you look at GDP, like it says here, we're not actually looking at the distribution of wealth in the country. If we did that, it would probably scare everybody to death. So people that actually do look at that stuff, it's scaring them. All you have to do is go on the news and or just start reading articles, read The Economist, and see how they are talking about how something needs to change, because people can't, if you're paying more than half your wealth is going, or half your income is going to just living quarters or living space, you can't afford to do anything else. And our economy is consumer driven. So if you can't buy things, eventually it's going to affect the whole economy. We all have to work together. It's not just about the rich getting rich. The rich can't get rich unless we buy things. So they have to redistribute that wealth in some way. All right. So there are approaches to how we calculate GDP. There's 3 approaches. And by the way, this is the last part of the notes that we're going to go through today. I'm not going to make you do the whole notes. You know, I never want to talk too long. So we're going to do these last 3 approaches, and then you're going to get an activity for the day, and we'll go on tomorrow. Okay? All right. So the production approach. This is when we only calculate the value added, meaning how much input did we put in? Okay, so let me give you an example. All right, so I'm going to pull this up. I'm opening all these tabs so that I can explain this. Okay, so let's say a wheat farmer here grows a bushel of wheat that cost $1. All right, so that means it took $1 to grow that bushel of wheat. The miller buys the wheat for $1, and which he turns into flour, and then he can sell that for $2. So he made $1. A buyer bakes the flour. He takes the flour and for $2, and then he turns it into bread and sells that for $5. So he's made $3 in profit. Make sense? So then a grocer, like an H-E-B, buys the bread for $5, but he sells it to the consumer for $9 because it's some really fancy bread. So they made a profit of $4. Now, if you add all that up, it actually, like, if you added up the cost and the price, it would be a lot more than what GDP actually counts for. So GDP would only count for the final product, which is $9. But if you went back through and tried to add up all the cost itself, it would be $17 and not $9. But GDP only counts $9. So it really, like I said, it's a snapshot and it misses a lot of the underlying things, but it's a good, just general measurement of how the country is doing. All right, so I think actually I'm going to stop there for today and explain to you what you're going to do on your activity. I don't want to kill you with talking the whole time. So today you're going to be doing this assignment, which is called, Is This Part of GDP? So I've been explaining to you for the last 10 minutes exactly what's counted into GDP and what's not. So you're going to go through here and you're going to say a haircut is purchased. Like that's the first question right there. Is that counted into GDP? Well, let's think about that. Is it a final product? Is it the result of, is it like a service? It is, right? So, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So if you think a haircut is purchased, is in the GDP, you're going to put an I. And if you think it's not, you're going to put an E. But let me give you, I'm going to do the first couple with you, okay? So a haircut is purchased. So this is a service. You're going to go see a hairdresser. The hairdresser had to go to school to learn how to be a hairdresser. They had to get licensed. All of that took money, right? But we don't count that in. We're just counting what the hairdresser's there. You go sit in the chair, you get your haircut. And that was a product that you bought from her, right? It's the result of a service, or him, whatever the hairdresser is, a male or female. So this is actually counted into GDP because it's a product that hairdresser has produced, okay? So that is an I. Now the next one, 2. Honda purchases steel for producing new cars. Well, that steel is not a part of the final car. It is a part of the final car, but it's not the final car. So the answer here is no, it is not included in GDP. So you would put an E. All right, so I got you guys started. I think these videos could be a little helpful for you because you can like rewind or fast forward, or if you get confused. Also, if you need to talk to me, just come by the classroom. I have fourth period lunch and fifth period conference, so you can always ask me questions like that, or you can send me a message on Google Classroom where I'm going to be posting these videos. That might be helpful. Please make sure that you are being diligent about getting your work in. And don't forget that I'm giving you till Wednesday to get your grade caught up for those of y'all that are really behind, or I'm going to have to get everybody else involved, like parents and the student success advisors downstairs. So please make sure that you get it together and get your stuff in. And be kind, because remember, I'm grading for 300 kids right now. So that means that if that's a lot more kids that I have to contact parents. So just don't make my life harder, please, and help me out and do your work. Get your work done. You're in the home stretch. You're almost graduated. You just have to push through a little bit more. You just have a few more months. I know you don't want to do it, but you just, you need these tools. Economics is going to affect you in your daily life, so it's very important to understand these concepts. So make sure that you are doing your work and getting your stuff done. All right? Okay, guys, get to work. And I will send you another video tomorrow to finish up the notes. Bye.